Hello, YouTubers! Welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha, and today I'm going to be looking at the second part in George A. Romero's zombie series, Dawn of the Dead, a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. It's funny to call these films sequels, really, because they don't really feature any recurring characters. They're just kind of all set in the same universe, in the aftermath of the same zombie apocalypse. So I struggle to call them sequels to each other. Really, it's how you define a sequel. Are all the Marvel movies in the cinematic universe really sequels to each other? Are all Kevin Smith films really sequels to each other, or Tarantino's for that matter? These just I think these are really sort of standalone films with their own distinct set of style, really. And Dawn of the Dead is my favourite. Not only my favourite of the series, it's definitely my favourite zombie movie of all time. Possibly my favourite horror movie of all time. I absolutely love it. It's a real roller coaster ride of a movie. Whereas the original Night of the Living Dead was very much, set up the rules of the zombie movie and all the cliches that you now have to put in a zombie movie. Dawn was really the film that invented the modern zombie movie. And by that I mean, once Romero had established the universe in Night of the Living Dead and the rules, he hit on the idea that because the only way to destroy a zombie is to destroy the brain, that if you have protagonists who are armed and can mow down zombies in vast droves, if you give them a machine gun, then what you get is really a hybrid of these horror movie and the zombie movie. You take it into a different territory where and it becomes less a story of which you get in most horror movies of when are the protagonists going to meet their grisly end, which I guess is the fascination with a lot of zombie movies. This film elevates it to that, to becoming a survival story, and you realizing that in this dire situation, this sort of awful, apocalyptic, almost depressing, nihilistic situation, you realise that there's a glimmer of hope, that there's a chance with the survivors, and just using their own ingenuity, that there's a chance for survival there. The plot of the film, in case you don't know, is you get the four main protagonists, who are Stephen, Peter, Roger, and Francine. Stephen, Peter, and Roger are members of the police force. So the film opens with them basically cleansing an apartment block that's been overrun with a zombie infestation. This film, I believe I'm right in saying that all the films are kind of set in over a real time period. So this will be sort of a decade after the outbreak that happened in the first film, and military law is sort of on the cusp of setting in, and the apocalypse is taking place, because you get news reports throughout the film, but as the film sort of progresses, the reports become less and less, and you get this overwhelming sense that society is collapsing. But you get the four main protagonists, who so three members of the police force, and Francine, who is the girlfriend of Stephen. They make a pact to escape on a helicopter, because one of them is a pilot, and escape somewhere. They don't know where they're going at first. They kind of stop off on the way and encounter some hillbilly zombies, and then they go on a bit and they discover an abandoned shopping mall. They stop there and they realise that although the place is overrun with zombies, that maybe they could set up a home there and live off the amenities that have been left in the mall, just ransack the shops and what have you, if they can rid the zombies from the place and lock the doors so they can't get in. So this is basically what happens in the first half of the film, and then the second half really deals with the aftermath of their decision to set up home in the mall, and really the despair that sets in, not at the situation, but more at the life that they set up for themselves. You know, they surround themselves with consumer goods and everything that's aspirational America says you must strive to acquire, but it eventually sort of eats away at them from the inside, much like the zombie virus does, and basically destroys them from the inside out. Much so, I mean, you can see there's sort of there's multi layers to the subtext here, and as I said in the last video, you know, the social commentary in all of Romero's films, and here he's very much commenting on consumer society. His inspiration for making the film and setting it in a mall was simply going around the shopping malls of America and seeing the way that people just sort of lollop around these places. Is lollop a word? As almost in a zombie-like state, you know, just trying to consume what they see in there. And so it wasn't a vast leap of the imagination to just put zombies in there. And they even have the characters say at one point, oh, they come here because it reminds them of their previous life. I've said in a previous video that zombies were very much the band that I was into before anyone else was. At least I feel that way. You know, I first saw this film in the late 90s, along with, you know, Peter Jackson's Brain Dead and, yeah, The Evil Dead and you know, various other knockoffs of this film, and I felt it. At the time, you know, I was going around saying, you know, why is no one else making zombie movies anymore? I mean, you got films that kind of had the same rules as zombie movies, like From Dusk Till Dawn. But I felt like Hollywood was missing a trick, that they weren't still making zombie movies, because it was a real eye-opener to me that the horror movie, and you could have a kind of horror movie, action movie hybrid. You know, the rules of mowing down zombies and going for the headshot and making it a survival story kind of elevated it above a lot of other horror movies and turned it into something different. And I felt like Hollywood was really missing a trick with not making zombie movies anymore. Of course, cut forward, you know, a couple of years, and we had 28 Days Later, which was made very much in the same spirit as the original Night of the Living Dead. You know, it was a low-budget independent movie, taken very seriously, but it was a sleeper hit. Danny Boyle's little film, and Alex Garland screenplay, made its budget back 10 times over, and maybe not 10 times over, but it was a big hit for the money they spent on that film. And off the back of that, all of a sudden you got you know, zombie movie after zombie movie appearing. You got, well, the remake, Zack Snyder's 2004 remake. You got the Resident Evil video game series being turned into a film franchise, which is still going to this day. You got Shaun of the Dead. And of course, you got the Walking Dead TV show, which owes a huge debt to Romero. And nowadays, why I say the zombies were the band that I was into before everyone else, it's because people are always coming up to me and say, well, I say always, whenever people come up to me and say, what would you do in a zombie situation, because they just watched The Walking Dead last night. Zombies are prime for network television, primetime television now. Apparently, I was like, I've been having this conversation now for 20 years, and now zombies have gone mainstream. I'm not interested anymore. But so there you go. Zombies, they are mainstream now, whereas for a long time, I always felt they were my thing that only I knew about. Obviously, I wasn't, but they were very much a cult thing. Zombies, when I first discovered them, and my gateway to discovering zombies was through this film, which I truly believe to be a masterpiece. It's the thing I like about it is. As well as having this survival aspect to it, and the social commentary, it was like the original. It retained its indie value in that it was an independent production. It wasn't that Night of the Living Dead was a major hit and Hollywood studios were throwing money at Romero. It was really made because Dario Argento, the Italian horror movie maker, was such a big fan of the original and saw the film as having artistic worth, beyond it just being a cheapo B movie, and he really wanted to see a sequel to it. So it retained its in indie value because him and Romero raised the money themselves and financed it independently. Again, it was shot in Pennsylvania, in Romero's hometown, home state, and they only had a budget of $1.5 million, which wasn't a huge amount even back in the late 70s. And and it was shot on very cheap film stock, that kind of American exploitation movie. If you watch any exploitation movie from the sort of the 60s, the 70s, it has a very similar look to Dawn of the Dead, and the film stock they used, the sort of cheapest 35mm film you could get. The effects work, it looks cheap. I think that's largely down to the stock they filmed it on rather than the effects work itself. Shout out to Tom Savini, who's kind of a maestro of gore effects work and a real trailblazer in his field. He has a cameo in the film, as he does in many of the films that he's worked on. He's most famous, I think, for playing Sex Machine in From Dusk Till Dawn, but he appears as a biker at the end of this film. But I mean, because of the cheap film stock, they painted the zombies grey to give them this dead look, but they look almost kind of blue in some shots as well. And the blood they use, it's kind of that sort of Hammer horror, a very bright primary red, the blood, so it looks kind of cheap. But as I've said before, I think I like cheap effects in my horror. I think there's something a lot scarier about a slight sort of fake aesthetic to a horror movie. A film that looks too real. I don't know why, but I can almost see the artifice when it becomes too real in a way. Whereas with cheap effects. I think because there's something sort of slightly off-putting. You know that blood doesn't really look like that. You know that a dead person doesn't really look like that. So I think it slightly sets you more off kilter in a funny sort of way when you see that kind of effects work, when you see that colour of blood or that tone to the skin on the zombies. It becomes slightly scarier, or just makes you sort of feel sort of more generally uneasy when you watch the film, which I really really like. Um, but but on the whole, I mean, the film, it's kind of a non-stop roller coaster ride. The first half of the film is basically just them sort of almost ethnically cleansing the place of the zombie infestation, and Romero shot the film, I think, with multiple cameras to save time, and so it's you get these scenes that are really not choppy, but they're they're kind of sort of all over the place. They have a real kinetic energy to them, and the film sort of never stops moving. The first half of the film, it's a real sort of exhilarating rush watching the first half, and then the second half, where the characters sort of settle into their lifestyles, and it looks almost aspirational. You almost envy the situation they end up in a funny sort of way, because it's almost a fantasy, I think, to be abandoned in a mall, yet to have the amenities in every shop at your disposal. Of course, it couldn't last forever, because if those characters were living there 30, 40 years later, I mean, they're still wearing garish 70s fashions and playing on 70s Space Raiders games, it would be quite a pitiful thing to witness. But at least from the get-go, it's almost an aspirational horror movie in a funny sort of way. And an inspired choice as well. I mean, the social commentary that's inherent in all these films can't be denied with this one. I mean, again, Romero, not great with actors. The performances in this film are kind of staid and wooden, and it's not to take anything away from the stars themselves, but I mean, they didn't really work much after this. Well, Ken Faree did, the African American who plays is it Peter? Yeah, Peter. He carried on working, I think, the most prolifically after this film, and he has a role in the 2004 remake as a TV evangelist, and he gets to re-deliver the classic line from this film, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Such an iconic line, it's on all the posters and all the promotional material for this film, and it's such a great line. It really encapsulates the film in a nutshell. That this is an end of days film, and you really feel it. Romero's, I think, grown in confidence as a writer since making the first film. You get the sense that this is a filmmaker who really has something to say, and I think he's an intelligent guy, Romero, and that comes across, especially in the early TV studio set portions of the film where you have a really intelligently written debater on the situation that society has found itself in, and it doesn't pander to the audience, the B movie audience who watch this. It's or talk down to them. It states the situation and the solutions or lack thereof in very erudite terms, and you get a sense that Romero has really got a point of view about this. I think where he really excelled as a writer anywhere would be in Day of the Dead, which we'll get onto next. But you can see the emergence of a great writer here, and an intelligent writer, and I think that's what elevates these films from being mere slasher flicks to something more substantial. Is that you had a very intelligent guy behind the camera and behind the typewriter as well. What more could I say? I think this film, it really kicks ass from start to finish, and it's what more can I say? It's my favourite horror movie. I think it is. Well, it's definitely my favourite zombie movie, and it's certainly the film that sort of ensnared me into my love of zombies. I think everybody has a film on that that did that for them. Well, all zombie movie fans, obviously, whether it be The Walking Dead or the Resident Evil computer games, or God forbid the films. But for me, it was definitely the original Dawn of the Dead, which I hold in the highest regards, and I think it's a classic. And that's all I'm going to say on it. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favour and get your hands on a copy. So that's all I'm going to say now. Join me for my next review, which will be on Day of the Dead. Until then, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see you all out there in YouTube land. I want to stop doing that. It's Let me know in the comments section whether you like the blowing the vape into the camera. I'm meant to be disappearing into the smoke, but it doesn't always work, Let's try again. Let's go for a good one here.